Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to demystify that hardware store jargon that could literally make or break your home's foundation. If you're gearing up for a masonry project, whether it's a simple backyard garden bed or a huge multi-story load-bearing wall, knowing your materials is absolutely critical. Today, we're settling the score between concrete blocks and cinder blocks. Here's our agenda for today: the great block confusion, what is inside the block, the three-step identification test, the weight and strength showdown, the foundation golden rule, and finally, making your final decision. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. The Great Block Confusion. Decoding the hardware store jargon. Have you ever been wandering the aisles of a hardware store, or maybe staring at a blueprint, and feeling completely overwhelmed by contractors throwing around terms like concrete, cinder, and cement block, as if they're all the exact same thing? Well, it's the most common question DIYers ask when they start a project. Are cinder blocks and concrete blocks actually the same? The short answer is absolutely no. Think of them more like cousins rather than identical twins. They might look similar from a distance, but they behave very differently under pressure. So, in the construction industry, almost all of these big, hollow gray blocks just fall under the umbrella term CMU. That's concrete masonry unit. And here's a fun little fact you can use to correct your contractor friends. The term cement block is really just casual slang for a CMU. Why? Because cement is just the binding powder. It's not a standalone structural material on its own. Moving on to Section 2, what is inside the block? It's all about the aggregate. Right, so if cement is just the binder, what actually makes a concrete block different from a cinder block? It all comes down to their composition and the aggregate mix used to bind them. Concrete blocks use dense, heavy materials: clean Portland cement, water, and heavy stuff like crushed stone, gravel, and fine sand. Cinder blocks, on the other hand, use that exact same cement and water base, but they swap out those heavy stones for lightweight fly ash, bottom ash, or industrial coal cinders. Seriously, cinder blocks are literally made from the leftover byproducts of burning coal. Section 3. The three-step identification test. How to spot vintage cinder blocks. Now, modern plants rarely pump out pure, old-school coal cinder blocks for residential use anymore. You're mostly going to find them in older homes, specialized decorative projects, or salvage yards. So how do you actually know what you're looking at? Well, here is a foolproof three-step test. Step 1 is texture. Concrete is uniformly gritty, kind of like an asphalt sidewalk, but cinder is noticeably rough, porous, and pitted. Step 2 is color. Concrete is light stone gray, while cinder blocks have this darker, charcoal gray hue with little dark flecks from the coal ash. But step 3 is honestly my favorite, the sound test. If you're ever in doubt, literally just tap it with a hammer. Concrete gives off a sharp, high-pitched metallic ring, while a cinder block just gives you a dull, hollow thud. It's hands down the fastest way to know exactly what material you're holding. Section 4. The weight and strength showdown. The tail of the tape. So this difference in aggregate creates a massive gap in physical density and structural strength. When it comes to sheer strength, solid concrete blocks are the undisputed heavyweight champions. Thanks to that hard gravel and stone, they have incredible compressive strength. They can handle immense vertical load-bearing pressure without bowing or crumbling. But cinder blocks? They're structurally weaker. That coal ash aggregate is naturally brittle, which means the block is prone to shearing and snapping under heavy loads. And that density takes a real physical toll. A standard 8x8 by 16-inch cinder block, which is full of tiny air pockets from the coal ash, weighs in at a pretty manageable 26 to 28 pounds. But swap out that ash for heavy stone gravel, and a hollow concrete block jumps up to 35 to 40 pounds. If your project actually requires solid concrete blocks with zero hollow core cells, you're looking at 50 to 60 pounds per block. Believe me, if you're lifting hundreds of these things by hand over a weekend, you are going to feel that density gap in your back big time. All right, Section 5, the foundation golden rule, preventing winter foundation disasters. Listen, if you're planning a home addition, a garage, or a workshop, your choice of foundation material is absolutely non-negotiable. I literally cannot emphasize this enough. As engineer Nazim strictly warns, never use true cinder blocks for a structural home foundation. If you ignore this rule, it's going to lead to disastrous consequences for your build, your budget, and frankly, your safety. So why is this the golden rule? Well, because cinder blocks are packed with all those tiny air pockets we talked about, they're highly porous. They basically act like a giant sponge, just sucking up water from the surrounding soil. Over time, that coal ash starts to degrade. Then winter hits, the water inside the block freezes, it expands, and it thaws. That entire cycle causes the brittle cinder block to just buckle and crumble your home's foundation right from underneath. On the flip side, a concrete block foundation, especially when you reinforce it internally with vertical steel rebar and fluid grout, safely holds back shifting soil. It gives you that rock-solid structural integrity that you need to support even multi-story buildings. Section 6. Making your final decision. Choosing the right material and mixing ratio. Now that we know the stakes, let's talk about the exact tools, prices, and numbers you need to confidently prep for your next project. If you're pouring core fill grout into your blocks, or even casting your own molds manually, you've got to know this industry-standard volumetric recipe. It's called the Master 1-2-3 ratio. That's 1 part Portland cement for chemical binding, 2 parts clean masonry sand to fill in the internal voids, and 3 parts crushed stone or coarse gravel. You just add water slowly until the mix reaches a damp, moldable, earth-like consistency. Basically, it should hold its shape when you squeeze it in your hand without dripping. Stick to this recipe and structural durability is totally guaranteed. But what about the budget, right? $1.50 to $3. That's the typical retail cost per standard concrete CMU. And yeah, while concrete blocks might cost a little bit more to transport because they're so heavy, they're large and modular. That means they install way faster than laying thousands of tiny traditional bricks, which is going to drastically cut down your masonry contractor labor fees and save you some serious cash in the long run. To wrap things up, let's bring kiln-fired clay bricks into the mix as a beautiful, weather-resistant, but definitely labor-intensive alternative. So here is your definitive checklist for choosing. If you need code compliance, load-bearing walls, or foundations, you absolutely must choose concrete. Now, if you're just building a quick DIY garden bed or an internal privacy partition, you can totally get away with cinder blocks. And if you're going for that timeless architectural beauty for exterior accents, patios, or a fire pit, traditional clay brick is your go-to. Which leaves us with one final, crucial question to ponder. Is your foundation built on rock-solid concrete or a brittle coal ash mistake just waiting for the winter freeze? Before you lay another block, check your materials, know your aggregates, do that hammer tap test, and ask yourself if you're truly building to last. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next project.